If You Could Hide to Kolob is sponsored by My Missionary Journal by Give Back Books. Do you know someone who is about to go out on a mission or is already in the field looking to keep good records? Head to Amazon now and search Guided Missionary Journal by Daniel Byram and get them the perfect gift. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name's Daniel. This is Clive.
Hello, everybody. Daniel, a bit to get into today, so should I just get into the quote and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so this is from a conference talk back in 2006. I would encourage all of us to continue to read and study the scriptures that we might understand them and apply them into our lives, the lessons we find there. I paraphrase the poet James Finney Baxter. Who learns and learns but never knows is like the one who plows and plows but never sows. Spending time each day in scripture study will, without doubt, strengthen our foundation of faith and our testimonies of truth.
Great. Thank you, Clive. Well, today's episode is Alma 17 and we're going to Alma 22. We are at a stage now where Alma, he's on his mission. If you remember, he was the chief of all the judges. We're in this era of the reign of the judges. He was the chief judge. He gave up that mantle of chief judge and he wants to be a missionary. He wants to spread the gospel. And that's what we've kind of been reading for basically all of the book of Alma. And today Alma's going to bump into the sons of Mosiah. And you'll remember as well that they were dissenters of the church. They didn't like the church at the start. Remember, they had this amazing conversion where they were kind of struck dumb for a few days while the Lord was teaching, or an angel perhaps was teaching them the mysteries of God, and then they became fully converted. So that's the story of, I guess, the backstory of where we're up to now. And Alma's finished in Ammoniah. He's now moving from a place called Gideon, and I think he's going down to Manti, isn't he, Clive? That tells us in verse 1. And now it came to pass that as Alma was journeying from the land of Gideon southward away to the land of Manti. So that's just one point. We've been talking a little bit about how do we know the geographical locations of all these places? Well, here's a very quick description that he was journeying from the land of Gideon southward away to the land of Manti. So then we have to think, okay, well, whenever we figure out where Gideon is, we know that if you traveled south, you hit Manti. Behold, to his astonishment, he met with the sons of Mosiah journeying towards the land of Zarahemla. So if he's traveling south, I guess they're traveling north. And to his astonishment, he meets up with them, Clive, like just randomly. Oh, my goodness, you're here. It's you guys. Where have you been for 14 years?
It's funny because as we'll go through the story of the sons of Mosiah, it seems like, and obviously it's not a coincidence, but it seems like they just happen upon things all the time. Oh, well, we were going to do this, but we just happened upon this, and that works in our favor. And even up to the very end, you're right, 14 years later, they just happen upon Alma on their way to the land of Zarahemla. So it's really, really good. And then it just gets into their story just immediately. No sort of, this is their story. It just sort of trails into it.
So the book of Alma so far is Alma going on his mission, teaming up with Amulek. We get chapters and chapters and chapters of their mission. Now we go from chapter 17 onwards and we get the sons of Mosiah's mission. And of course, after that, then we get Alma the younger then's getting older and he's kind of teaching his kids. So there's a couple of things here, Clive, that I just wanted to talk about that kind of introduce who the character, I guess, is probably the best way to put it, the character of these people. So verse 2. So these are the sons of Mosiah, which we've already mentioned, were with Alma at the time the angel first appeared unto them. Therefore Alma did rejoice exceedingly to see his brethren. And what added more to his joy, they were still his brethren in the Lord. So he's just, obviously, as soon as he's caught up with them, he's quizzed them and he's realized straight away that they were men of the gospel. And I can just imagine how rapt he would have been immediately going, my goodness, tell me your stories. Like, this is unreal. Like, I'm so glad that you guys have still got testimonies. It says here, yea, and they had waxed strong in the knowledge of the truth, for they were men of sound understanding, and they had searched the scriptures diligently that they might know the word of God. So they were clearly like well-versed, and they didn't just rest on their laurels. They didn't just go, I've got a testimony. They continued to educate themselves in gospel matters.
Yeah, and they've been on a mission for 14 years, and all returned missionaries will understand that. I suppose that when you're on your mission, things are just excelled so quickly. Like you learn things and you retain all this information so well when it comes to gospel study. So I guess in the last 14 years, with them continually, as Alma puts it, searching the scriptures diligently and continue being good men. He talks about how they prayed a lot and fasted a lot, and they had the spirit of prophecy with them. So for just 14 years straight, just continue having this growth, just this spiritual growth, and it's great. And, we'll talk about their journeyings, but it's good to understand as well that they didn't go alone. In verse 8, it says they departed into the wilderness with their numbers, which they had selected to go to the land of Nephi. So the sons of Mosiah, Ammon, Aaron, Omni, and Himnah, but we'll talk about some other people as well as we go on, because they're the ones that had decided to go with the sons of Mosiah.
Well, that's a good point that you raise. In verse 3, it tells us what preparation that these men had. And it says here that they had given themselves to much prayer and fasting, that they had the spirit of prophecy, the spirit of revelation, and when they taught with the power and authority of God. So they didn't just read the scriptures at all. They were applying these things in their lives all the time. So they were reading, studying, and then they were praying, they were acting, they were praying, and they were fasting. And the blessings that they received, really clear. Therefore, they had the spirit of prophecy and the spirit of revelation. And when they taught with the power and authority of God. So studying the scriptures, lots of prayer, lots of fasting, made them absolutely exceptional missionaries, and they were armed with God's hand, essentially, to help them out and to do what they did. And it says here that they brought many people to the truth in verse 4, bringing many people to the knowledge of the truth. Yea, by the power of the words, many were brought before the altar. So I highlighted this because I actually thought I would ask you this question. Let's see what you thought. So verse 4, that idea of altar, could that be physical altar? Do you think that there was any temple type, altar type, physical places that they were able to build in the 14 years? Obviously, we're going to learn the story, and we know that there was a lot of success in the 14 years. So were these people free to worship and potentially went and entered into covenants?
I think it's not far-fetched to think so. Later on we'll learn that King Lamoni built synagogues after he's converted to the gospel. It only makes sense that if he's willing to build those things, they'll have temples, they'll have churches, they'll have places of worship. Yeah, when it actually says the altar of God, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means a place to confess their sins so they can be pure, or an actual, like a temple type ceremony. I'm not sure.
But what we can safely assume is that they didn't just go there and teach people. People got baptized and entered into covenants with God.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a full true conversion. They did a great job in those 14 years, definitely.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a summary in verse 4, but the actual meaning behind those words is crazy significant. So a couple of other things in verse 6. Now, these were their journeyings, and then it goes through what they did. They give a really quick summary that they went through the first year. They left Zarahemla. They took their weapons with them. Like you said, they took a bunch of people with them, and they were fasting and praying on the way, and they really wanted God to help them to touch the hearts of the Lamanites, that they wouldn't essentially be skinned on sight. I mean, the idea at this time, if we think about how poorly looked on the Lamanites were from the Nephites' perspective, this is a death sentence. In reality, people would have said, you're crazy. What do you mean you're going to go talk to the Lamanites? Like, they are absolutely nuts. They will kill you on sight just because you're a Nephite. So they were obviously reaching out to the Lord a lot, that please let them receive us and let them know that we're here not under threat. We're not the bad people coming to take over their land.
Well, I think in verse 11 it's good because it says, the Lord blesses them and says to be patient in long suffering and afflictions, show forth good examples. I thought that was a really good thing to say.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
he says, and I will make an instrument of thee in my hands unto the salvation of many souls. So, yes, it will be difficult, but if you continue to be a good example to these people, and that's a start. That's a start, being a good example. And we've talked
Yeah.
about that before. Remember who you're representing, and that's what they did. And that's the blessing that they've been blessed with. And yeah, it goes into a bit of detail about, again, how the Lamanites were a wild, hardened, ferocious people, delighted in robbing, plundering, indolent. They might not labor with their own hands, idol worshipping. There's just a lot of stuff. So I really like verse, halfway through verse 13, even after all this, they decided that they would separate and they would go to their own mission fields, I suppose.
It's kind of their
And
plan, isn't it? They have like a bit of a battle plan. Okay, how are we going to do this? What are we actually gonna do?
that's right. So then you're right, because they did. They got to the borders of the Lamanites, and then they said, okay, halfway through 13, trusting in the Lord that they should meet again at the close of their harvest, for they supposed that great was the work which they had undertaken. And that immediately I think of Doctrine and Covenants section 4. Every missionary has to memorize it, where it says the field is white, all ready to harvest. This is their time. They've been chosen at this time for these people. So they're in there harvesting the work of the Lord, and they will meet together once the harvest is done. I think that's just a great wording. It's just written so well.
I double highlighted the last sentence and the first few words of the next verse. For they supposed that great was the work which they had undertaken, and assuredly it was great. And I thought that was weird that they were in two separate verses. For they supposed that great was the work which they had undertaken, and assuredly it was great. And it was a great work. And assuredly it was great is almost like a past tense. Like and Mormon's surmising this is going, it was great. And then he gives that what the Lamanites were like. It was just unbelievable of what they did. Okay, well, if we fast forward here to verse 18, I might read it out. Let's have a bit of, let's see what you think about this. We know that they separated one from another and they kind of had this plan. But it says here in verse 18, now Ammon, being the chief among them, or rather he did administer unto them, and he departed from them after having blessed them according to their several stations, having imparted the word of God unto them, or administered unto them before his departure, and thus they took their several journeys throughout the land. So bless them according to their several stations.
I mean, I see this as setting them apart as missionaries. Like when you get your calling, you get set apart. You get set apart as a missionary, and this is exactly what I see happening here. Ammon, being the chief leader over them, is the one that sets them apart. I'm not sure who would have set him apart, but what an amazing time. These blessings that they've been given, and then Ammon has given this charge to give them blessings before they go about and set about their missions in the field. Such an incredible thing. So it then, Daniel, it gets into the story of Ammon, and it gets into his journeyings, and as we go on, we'll learn about everyone else, but we're going to start with Ammon.
So, Clive, I kind of start the story off with in verse 22. So he goes down into the land of Ishmael, and I'm going to consult my Mormon's map by John L. Sorensen here. It's really good. I really like it. If anyone wants to buy this book, I'm sure you can get it from Amazon or somewhere, but it's really, really good. So Ishmael, of course, is part of the land of Nephi, and it's right near Mormon. So we'll remember Mormon, the waters of Mormon. But it's at the sort of the northern end of the land of Nephi. And so I'm imagining as well, like it must be pretty special for Ammon to go down to this area, like knowing that this is the area of like the origins of his people. You know what I mean? Like it must have been walking down and going, wow, we've got so much history here. This is what an amazing spot. Like this is where Nephi was. Like this is where Lehi was. This is amazing.
Yeah, I suppose it would have been. Yeah, until he got captured by the king.
Yeah, well, for a minute, he was really happy. So, okay, so let's look at 22. So, like you'd mentioned, Clive, he was captured by the king. And it says here, and the king inquired of Ammon if it were his desire to dwell in the land among the Lamanites or among his people. And Ammon said unto him, Yea, I desire to dwell among this people for a time, yea, and perhaps until the day I die. And then 24, and it came to pass that King Lamoni was much pleased with Ammon, and caused that his band should be loosed, and he would, that Ammon should take one of his daughters to wife. There's so much to unpack in these 3 verses. So, first of all, he gets captured and he goes before the king, and we learn that the king is King Lamoni, and he straight away asks him some questions. And I've got some theories on why didn't he just kill him? Like I've got a bit of a theory, I think.
Well, I mean, the Lord has blessed Ammon in this area, so immediately I think the king's hearts were probably softened. But also, Ammon, obviously good in speaking. He was bound and he was captured by the king. But whatever he said to the king, immediately the king's like, I think you're awesome. Come marry one of my daughters. Yeah, obviously, he's just good in speaking.
Do you think that, is there any way that Ammon would have been recognizable as being like royal lineage? And does King Lamoni have a soft spot thinking that you're royal? I don't know if he would know he's royal, but he is. He's an heir to King Messiah's throne. And, as far as King Lamoni is concerned, he wouldn't know that he has or hasn't taken up the kingship. But I wonder if there's any marks on him, or if there's anything, or he looks a certain way, or acts in a certain way, or is educated in a certain way that would show that he is a royal lineage.
I'm not sure. I mean, kids these days don't understand how we communicated with our friends without Facebook, and we don't understand how our parents did it without phones.
Yeah.
Or letters. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the news, I'm sure there was some way that news got around back then, but I don't know how. But yeah, it's possible.
I was just thinking that, he immediately goes, well, do you want to take one of my daughters to wife? Because he says, yeah, I want to live here until essentially either you kill me or I just die.
Yeah.
I'm going to, and perhaps until the day I die. And so he was so happy. And I was actually just thinking about this today. Like, I wonder if he's been recognized that he's royal. So King Lamoni's gone, yep, you can hook up with my daughter and I can unite the cities.
Yeah, possible. I mean, remember when Alma was out and they're like, well, we know who you are. We know you're Alma. How did they know he was so far away from where he started? So yeah, I'm sure maybe you're right. Maybe the word did go around. But it's interesting, isn't it, Daniel, that the king offered his daughter, and basically if he was to marry the king's daughter, he'd be the king's right-hand man, really. But
he'd be an heir, right? He'd be an heir to the throne. Yeah,
but Ammon went, no.
As a Nephite.
Yeah, but Ammon said, no, but I'll be your servant. And, I mean, what a humbling, I mean, do you think he did it for a purpose? Do you think, he sort of went, I can show the power more if I'm a servant, because I can show how I can build up? Because if I'm an heir, if I'm just sitting next to the king, I can't really make many decisions. Do you think that's maybe the idea?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that if he's the servant, he's showing that he can serve Lamoni, and he's probably being an example of how we would serve God, I think. So if Ammon's serving Lamoni and serving God, then it's not too far-fetched to be humble towards God, who he's going to teach him about, down the track.
Yeah.
But I like the next bit, and this is something interesting here. So there's just so much to unpack from this chapter, and we could do an entire episode just on this chapter. But okay, so he says that he's going to be the servant, and it came to pass that this is midway 25 that you've just mentioned. It came to pass that he was set among other servants to watch the flocks of Lamoni, according to the custom of the Lamanites. So custom of the Lamanites. So he's become a servant and following in a custom or tradition that already existed. And after he had been in the service of the king for 3 days, as he was with the Lamanitish servants, going forth with their flocks to a place of water. So that there's Lamanites come and drive their flocks away. That's not the point that I wanted to mention. He's with the he's only he's only a part of this custom of being a servant for 3 days. Who knows how long he was chatting with the king for? By the way, could have been a week, could have been a month, could have been a day. You know, he was bound for a bit. Sees the king. He's 3 days, and then it says here as he was with the Lamanitish servants. Now we have the word Lamanitish mentioned twice, and I'm sure to goodness I highlighted the second time. I did. It's in chapter 19 when we're talking about Abish, who we're going to hopefully we'll get to a bit later. So, what do you think is Lamanitish? That was my question. What's Lamanitish? It's not Lamanites. It's not Nephites. It's Lamanitish.
Well, I mean, I'd probably describe your kids as Danielish, like not quite Daniel, but similar vein. So maybe Lamanitish is not quite Lamanites, but they follow the traditions of the Lamanites, or well, they're the servants. So I don't know. Maybe they're Nephites that have been captured and they're forced to be Lamanites. I don't know. What do you have a thought?
Yeah, I was wondering if it was like, your dad's a Nephite and your mum's a Lamanite, or vice versa.
Right.
Or, married into it, or something like that, or,
like the
maybe
priests of Noah, they married Lamanite women, and I guess their kids would be Lamanitish, or they would be Lamanitish.
Or maybe like Lamanites who have married Ishmaelites.
Ah, right.
Like something like that. Or, they could very well just be prisoners. They could just be prisoners and just go, you're now a Lamanitish person. You're not an actual Lamanite. So it could be prisoners. But I was thinking, could it be, like a non-full Lamanite, but also a bit of Ishmaelite in there as well. Some people have got German genes, or Greek genes, or Italian genes.
But you don't hear Lamanemuels.
Oh, yeah, I mean, fair. Anyway, it was literally a guess. There is nothing else in here. We talk about Abish later on, Lamanitish women. So there's Lamanitish women and there's Lamanitish men, because I'm guessing the Lamanitish men are the servants looking over the flocks, because that would have been more of a manly job as opposed to a female job.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, we've spent way too much time on this verse. So, also, who knows? Maybe someone
let's
can
get
tell
into
us.
the interesting story then. So, as you said, the Lamanites came and scattered the flocks. And, Ammon, he was among the Lamanites-ish people trying to secure the flocks. But they gathered all the flocks of the sheep back together. And then the Lamanites came again and scattered them again. And Ammon came up with this idea, which is interesting that Ammon came up with the idea and none of the other servants. The other servants were sort of, murmuring, going, great, now we're going to die because the flock's been scattered. But halfway through 33, it says, this Ammon saying, encircle the flocks round about, that they flee not. And I go and contend with these men who do scatter our flock. So he's gone, let's get them together, let's surround them, and I'll go talk to these guys that keep scattering the flocks. And, it's just Ammon, but there's a lot of Lamanites to come with them. So they were sort of like, well, who is this guy coming to us? When they saw Ammon, they weren't worried. But Ammon came in with slings and started slinging rocks at them. And then not even, that wasn't even the end of it. He did kill one of them, but then others came to him and went to attack him. And I think we might just read that because it'll make more sense if we read it. So if you read 36 and I'll read 37.
Okay. But Ammon stood forth and began to cast stones at them with his sling. Yea, with mighty power he did sling stones amongst them. And thus he slew a certain number of them, insomuch that they began to be astonished at his power. Nevertheless, they were angry because of the slain of their brethren, and they were determined that he should fall. Therefore, seeing that they could not hit him with their stones, they came forth with clubs to slay him.
But behold, every man that lifted his club to smite Ammon, he smote off their arms with his sword. For he did withstand their blows by smiting their arms with the edge of his sword, insomuch that they began to be astonished and began to flee before him. Yea, and they were not few in number, and he caused them to flee by the strength of his arm. So he's shown there the power that he has, the power of God. And he doesn't stop there. He just keeps working. And what is strange, Daniel, is that the servants, so astonished by this, take the arms to the king and say, "Look what's happened." Now, when you read it, you go, "Ah, maybe they did it to show him," but couldn't they have just told the king he's cut off the arm? Why did they physically grab these arms that have been chopped off and take them to the king? What an odd thing to do.
It is odd. It's odd for us now, but I actually did a bit of reading on this topic and I found a really cool BYU article, and I'm going to make sure I give credit to the right person here. Bruce E. Yerman, Yerman, Yerman. And he wrote this really cool article, which I like. It's got some great pictures on it. But he talks about how normal this might have actually have been back then. And he gives a couple of examples. One is in Mexico's National Palace. There's an artist. There's pictures, lots of pictures around, but there's a couple there. One of them is by a guy called Diego Rivera. And he's got some Aztec and Mesoamerica paintings. And I'll just read what it says here. This is from Bruce H. Yeoman's article. So he's describing the carefully researched paintings. One displays a precious jade necklace. Another admirer, so this is describing what's in the painting. Another admirer, a soldier, offers the woman an arm of a white man whom he surely had just defeated in combat. Then he goes on to say that Aztec warriors held aloft the severed arms of the victims as they taunted and threatened the Spanish and their native allies who were within earshot. This whole article is talking about that there is good, solid history that this was somewhat normal in Aztec times.
So I guess it was quite abnormal then for Ammon not to go and do it, to go and show, "Hey, here's all these arms." And then the fact that the servants carried the arms and said, "Hey, this guy's done this."
I don't know if it would have been abnormal for Ammon or if it was more abnormal to go and show the king. I think it was probably more odd to go show the king what Ammon had done, but thinking about the other servants, they were stressed the whole time about what the king would think or do of them. So perhaps they run off to the king to try and get brownie points for themselves, where obviously Ammon doesn't need to do that. But yeah, it's like I really found this super fascinating when I was reading through it. There's loads more examples of arm severing, let's call it, of that Mesoamerican times. But yeah, they go in, they take it to the king, and we see this. This is basically chapter 18 now. So verse 1, it came to pass that King Lamoni caused that his servants should stand forth and testify to all the things which they had seen concerning the matter. So I'm starting to think here, the wheels must be seriously turning in Lamoni's head here. Like, you need to slow down and take me through this because this is a huge deal and I'm starting to really consider who this guy is. And that's what we learn in verse 2, right?
Well, yeah, they just explain sort of who he is, and the king sort of has this idea because they've got this tradition of belief that a great spirit will come, which is, not completely off to what the truth is, but it's just a little bit of truth with a little bit of false, which is what they've always believed. So he wants, you think maybe that this Ammon is this great spirit. And he says, well, in verse 8, well, where is this man with all this such great power? And the servant said, well, he's feeding the horses. You commanded him to, so he's feeding the horses, watering the flock, preparing the horses and chariots. And when the king had heard this, he was amazed. And he said that, I know, in verse 11, now I surely know that this is the great spirit. So he calls Ammon and he says,
but just on that, he's stressed about calling Ammon. Now I surely know that this is the great spirit, and I would desire him that he come in unto me, but I durst not. Like he's like, if Ammon is the great spirit that I know is the sun god in human form or something like that, I don't actually want to call him in because he's like, I'm in fear of him. I don't think he's coming from the angle that he's going to take my kingdom. but he's more just so shocked and so amazed that this great spirit in human form has graced his kingdom with his presence. That's the kind of impression I get, at least. Like, he's not
Yeah,
doing it from a jealousy perspective like other kings do. He's doing it from a humility perspective.
yeah, most definitely. And then even when Ammon does come to him, the king, yeah, he doesn't really know what to say. And so he's quiet for a long time. And Ammon sort of, prompts him and says, well, what do you, verse halfway through verse 14, what wilt thou that I should do of thee, O king? The king answered him, not for the space of an hour.
Yeah.
What was going through his head was he contemplating, what should I say? What can I say? This is that great spirit. Now the time's come. How should I approach this? So, but then Ammon said, what do you desire of me? But the king answered him, not. And it came to pass that Ammon, being filled with the Spirit of God, therefore perceived the thoughts of the king. Again, we talked about this last week, perceiving the thoughts. He has that gift of the Spirit to be able to perceive the thoughts of the king. And he wants to know, he says, well, you want to know how I was able to defend these flocks? And, the king said, well, yeah, you must be this great spirit, who are you? I say unto you, what is it that thy marvelings are so great? Behold, I am a man, and I am thy servant. This is Ammon speaking to the king.
Yeah.
Therefore, whatsoever desirest thou which is right, that will I do. And the king heard these words and marveled again that, Ammon had perceived his thoughts and knew what he was going to say. So the king said to Ammon, well, basically, whatever you want to do, I'll give to you. And Ammon said, well, the only thing I want to do is teach you about the gospel.
Yeah, that's verse 21. And now, if thou wilt tell me concerning these things, whatsoever thou desirest, I will give unto thee. And if it were needed, I would guard thee with my armies, but I know that thou art more powerful than all they. Nevertheless, whatsoever thou desirest of me, I will grant it unto thee. He's saying, I'll give you, like, you are the great spirit in human form. Whatever you want, you can have. Like, I'm here to worship you. I spend all my time worshiping you. And in fact, I get the people of my kingdom to worship you. Do you want my armies? But they're not going to do anything because you're more powerful than my armies. Like, since I was knee high to a grasshopper, I've been taught about how powerful you are. So I just, that wording's pretty good. Now, Ammon being wise, yet, this is 22. Now, Ammon being wise, yet harmless, he said unto Lamoni, wilt thou hearken unto my words if I tell thee by what power I do these things? And this is the thing that I desire of him. And so Ammon uses this moment. This is Ammon's moment of what he's been there the whole time. And, you think about how Ammon came into this situation. He kind of stumbles in, he gets arrested. And of course, the Lord is preparing the surroundings of Lamoni to be able to become a situation that softens Lamoni's heart to the part where Lamoni is able to listen. If, the Lord knows that perhaps if Ammon had walked straight in and got this audience with Lamoni in chapter 18, where he comes up and says, you can have my daughter. If Ammon went, no, I don't want your daughter. I'm actually going to tell you about the church. Lamoni might have gone, get out. But the Lord knows that he's needed to go through this situation to get the attention of Lamoni. And, certainly got the attention of Lamoni through this. Lamoni thinking that he's the great spirit. And because Lamoni is so wrapped up with the great spirit, he's willing now to listen to Ammon and to listen to whatever he's got to say.
Well, what's interesting, Daniel, is there's a lot of back and forth now between Lamoni and Ammon. And this happens quite a few times with the Sons of Messiah's preachings. So I was thinking, if we were to do sort of what Lamoni said, if I say what Lamoni said, you say what Ammon said, then when we find this again, we can just say, it's the same thing that's been spoken of. And, instead of reading it over and over every time this comes up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing that Ammon says is...
So what verse are we going to and from?
So we're going from, basically, it's 24 to 35. It's just...
So we're going... So we're essentially... So 24 to 35 is, and he said this, and then Ammon said this, but we're essentially just going to be Lamoni and Ammon.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
So Ammon first starts off with, do you believe in God? So Lamoni says, so I'll do Lamoni, you do Ammon.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
Do you believe in a great spirit?
Yes.
This is God. He created all things in heaven and earth.
I believe he created all things on earth, but I don't know the heavens.
The heavens is a place where God dwells with his holy angels.
Is it above the earth?
Yes, and he looks down to all his children and he knows all the thoughts and intents of the heart.
I believe all the things you are saying, are you sent from God?
I am a man. In the beginning, God created man in his own image. I am called by the Holy Spirit to teach the people to be brought to the knowledge of that which is just and true. And this is from verse 35, Clive. And a portion of that Spirit dwelleth in me, which giveth me knowledge and also power according to my faith and desires which are in God.
So that's the back and forth that happens a few times. People ask the same questions and get the same answers. And now Ammon
So he's actually
starts...
teaching out, Clive, just quickly. Do you think he's ad-libbing this, or he's like holding up the scriptures going, in the beginning was man. God created man after his image. Like, hey, you've already read that. These are the tablets that you've got here in your kingdom. Or do you reckon he's just, because if he knows of the Great Spirit, he must know of a beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. Not sure, because he does then go into the creation. He starts from the creation all the way up to the present time, including when Lehi left Jerusalem. So I guess maybe he's sort of going, well, sort of the story. I'm going to fill in all the blanks that you didn't quite understand.
Using our common ancestors' writings.
That's right. And like you said last time, it's interesting that everyone still understands Lehi.
Yeah,
Even it's been hundreds of years ago, they still know of Lehi. So now the king, he really believes Ammon. He's feeling the Spirit a lot, and he cries out to the Lord. This is right at the end. This is in verse 41. And he began to cry unto the Lord, saying, O Lord, have mercy according to thy abundant mercy, which thou hast had upon the people of Nephi. Have upon me and my people. And now, when he had said this, he fell unto the earth as if he were dead. So just like Ammon and his brothers in Alma, he's struck down. Same sort of way, not quite with an angel, but with the power of God. After, now feeling the Spirit so strong. And so many things happened in between. I don't know if we're going to really get into it, Daniel, but now we're on 19. The queen comes and she's struck down as well. And
she goes to Ammon, doesn't she? She goes, like, people are telling me he's dead, but she says stink, doesn't she? In verse 5, halfway through verse 5, and some say that he is not dead, but others say that he is dead, and that he stinketh, and that he ought to be placed in the sepulchre. But as for myself, to me he doth not stink.
I'm used to his smell. This is just his normal smell.
This is his usual aroma. This isn't death aroma. This is his normal. He normally stinks.
Yeah. So can you raise him basically? Can you get him up?
There is a lot, isn't there, in these chapters? I mean, there's just so much. Like,
there is so much, but it is quite repetitive, though. The same thing that happens with Ammon happens later with Aaron. Aaron teaches the same thing, and the same thing happens. The king falls to the earth as if he was dead, and then comes back a few days later and preaches to the people.
Well, can we talk about Abish or Abish?
Yeah, we definitely talk about Abish. Do you know much about Abish? It's another one of those...
No, I'm asking you. I've got this one thing highlighted because I found another Lamanite-ish commentary, so I'm throwing that to you. But I have wrote here in my scriptures, Abish sealed portion. So I've got 3 candidates of books that could be in the sealed portion: Xenos, Aminadai, and Abish.
Well, Abish, something happened with Abish. Abish has an incredible father. I know, from zero study of Abish, because I spent so much time on Aminadai. It says right at the end of 16, whose name was Abish, she having been converted unto the Lord for many years, on account of a remarkable vision of her father. So something's happened with her father. He's had some kind of incredible vision, and she's been, brought to the truth from then. So she was one of the good people in the land.
I wonder, we don't have much time left in this podcast, but I wonder if when the Nephites moved out, did all of them move out, or did some stay? And there was like a secret band of Nephites that were living amongst the Lamanites still worshiping God. Like, did every single one of them go?
Like Abinadi, where he was sort of off with some people that understood the truth, but they couldn't really go out in public preaching because it wasn't the right time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some maybe offshoot branch of people that were super close with Nephi. They didn't want to move. Maybe they just kept themselves to themselves and lived in an outer village and sort of came hanging around, were still hanging around the time. So people, maybe they knew about. I mean, it's just a really far-fetched idea, but I was thinking actually about that today as well. Is it probably a bit more far-fetched to think that 100% of people who believed in God left the area? That's probably more far-fetched than to think that those people who was out in some village that kept believing in God. And so maybe these people were part of the Abish father clan.
I mean, it's a big area. We can look on the map and go, oh, they seem really close, but it's a big area. It's Central America.
The further you zoom out, the closer they are. All right, what else are we looking at before we wrap up this episode? Because again, there's just too much. If I turn the next page, I've got that many verses highlighted.
Well, I mean, the story sort of goes that King Lamoni was converted so much that he wanted to go with Ammon to preach to the people. And he said, hey, let's go visit my father, who's the king of the land of Nephi. But the Lord said to Ammon, well, no, don't go there. The king will kill you. So he sends him off somewhere else instead. But then it just so happens, and obviously it didn't just so happen, but it just so happens that on their journey, they came across King Lamoni's father and was able to speak with him, just him, one-on-one. And he was sort of converted. He sort of understood, but he wasn't fully converted.
And they see Aaron, don't they?
Well, later on, yeah. So they go and see Aaron, and then Ammon's preaching to some people, and Aaron goes off to the land of Nephi and speaks with the king. And he goes through the same steps that King Lamoni went through with the questions. And then Aaron speaks again about the creation through to the atonement and everything else in between. And then the king's converted then. So you've got King Lamoni. Well, King Lamoni is converted. His father's now converted. Same way, he drops down as if he's dead. People think he's dead. Some people try and kill Aaron. But
well, maybe we'll wrap it up, Clive, with these a couple of these verses here. If we go back to Alma chapter 19, verse 35 and verse 36, this is the end result of Ammon's hard work. And it came to pass that there were many that did believe in their words, and as many as did believe were baptized, and they became a righteous people, and they did establish a church among them. And thus the work of the Lord did commence among the Lamanites. Thus the Lord did begin to pour out his spirit upon them, and we see that his arm is extended to all people who will repent and believe in his name. Like, I just love that, because if I think about, if we go back to 17, the Lamanites are just, why would you go and visit them? They're ferocious. They're robbing people, plundering. They seek after gold and riches. They're murderers. But after the Lord touches their lives, and through his servant Ammon, who is blessed to be an instrument of their hands, we see after how many years after the Nephites are booted out, we now see the Lamanites. What would this be? 510, 520 years later, the gospel finally comes back amongst the descendants of Laman and Lemuel, which is pretty special.
It is pretty special. If I could just end with one thing I found really fascinating, Daniel. So when King Lamoni's father stumbles upon Ammon, he's worried for his life. And he says in chapter 20, verse 23, fearing he should lose his life, he said, if thou wilt spare my life, I will grant unto thee whatsoever thou wilt ask, even half of my kingdom. And then when he's converted to the gospel, he says, this is 22 verse 15, halfway down, yea, what shall I do that I may be born of God, having this wicked spirit rooted out of my breast and received his spirit, that I may be filled with joy, that I may not be cast off from the last day? Behold, said he, I will give up all that I possess, yea, I will forsake my kingdom, that I might receive this great joy. Such a difference between, well, I'm worried I'm going to die, so I'll give you half my kingdom so I don't, compared to, now I'm worried for the welfare of my soul, I will give up everything I have. Just a true conversion, I say.
Amazing. Yeah, so much. I'm so glad we got to do this lesson. There's so much that we've covered, and there's so much still to cover. And enjoy this lesson, everyone. It's so good, and what incredible missionaries the Sons of Mosiah ended up being. Thank you for joining us. If you could hide to Kolob podcast, catch us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and we're on Spotify and Apple as well. Thank you, and we will see you for next week's episode.